Hello, super excited today because we have a compilation of all of the coastal projects that I've done so far this year. Let's go ahead and get right on into it.
DIY number one.
All right, this is a sign that I had gotten from a Michael's grab bag, if you will believe it. It was originally $24.99. I got it in the $5 grab, and I said bag, but it was really a grab box. And then I was also showing you the Love wood cutouts that I picked up from the Dollar Tree. There were two in that pack. I started taking off those little cardboard protectors, and then I was like, you know what, I'm going to leave them on. So I'm trying to decide what I want to do with this. I definitely want to leave that natural wood around the inside of the frame. I'm going to leave that alone, but the rest of this I want to paint. I'm going to use the ocean to cover up all of the floral pattern, and then I'm going to be using pool on the area where we've got this kitchen is seasoned with love. Now, if you feel like you don't have quite the steadiest hand, you can certainly tape this off. I opted not to. I'm just running a very flat brush right along each of the edges and just getting it all filled in like that. Now, the ocean chalk paint did offer really pretty good coverage, but I did go back in and I gave it a second coat. Once that was done, I'm coming in with the pool. Pool definitely did not have as good coverage, as you can see, probably because it's just a much lighter color. So I did end up with 3 or maybe even 4 coats of the pool on this. I'm not sure if there was anything that I could have done. I guess I could have gone over it all with white first and then gone in with the pool, and perhaps that would have knocked out the letters a little bit better. I'm not sure. Not sure on that. But I'm just going in and being careful around all of the edges to make sure that I'm not hitting my ocean color. And just getting everything covered up here. And for some of the last coats, I did come in with a larger brush just to help with brush strokes and help it be a little smoother. So then while that was drying, I grabbed one of the little love cutouts and my Adirondack white chalk paint again. At first I was thinking I wanted to try and keep the white just on the top surface because it has a really pretty dark brown surface around the edges. And eventually I was like, nope. I just want all of it white. And so I went ahead with my little brush and got all the nooks and crannies. And now I have this cute little seashell from one of the packages that I've gotten from Dollar Tree. And I am just covering up the O with it. So I'm just seeing how it's going to look on my sign. Already super excited. And then I decided I wanted to brighten up the outer frame on this. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but the frame itself, it was a little bit more of an, I think it was, I don't know. It's not as bright a white. I was going to say it's a little bit off-white. I don't know. It's between white and off-white. I just wanted it brighter and to match my little love sign. So I had gone over with that. Now I've got my love about where I want to position it. I have not secured it just yet. But I'm going to come in and I'm just going to hand letter this because I was being lazy and I didn't want to bother with my Cricut, if I'm completely honest. So, you know, if you have stencils, if you have a Cricut and you want to do it that way, you know, again, do what makes your heart happy. But I opted to just hand letter this with my gold paint pen. It's just a Sharpie paint marker, paint pen. And then I just added on some more of my wood glue. Sorry, I'm a little bit off frame, and some of the hot glue for the instant bond. And I am securing my little love to the center of my frame now. I'm just kind of removing some of that extra hot glue that was kind of smooshing out. And that is it. I'm in love with this piece and I would love to hear what you think.
DIY number two.
All right, I have this glass vase or candle holder that was in my stash. I think it's a vase, and a Dollar Tree little stand, for lack of a better term, that is from one of my sweet subscribers, Rose. She had sent that to me a while back. And then I have some nautical rope, and I am just using my hot glue to attach the little riser to my glass vase. And if you want this to have a more of a long-term hold, I definitely would suggest using E6000, but the hot glue is going to be sufficient for my purposes. And now I'm starting at the base of what I've put together here and using the nautical rope to wrap around the very base, and I'm going to work my way up and around. And I want to apologize right off the bat if you end up hearing any banging in the background. Our roof is actually being replaced at the moment, and I have got to get this voiceover done because the video has to get posted today. So forgive any background noise that you might hear, and I will also apologize in advance if any of the dogs that are presently in my house start barking at what's going on outside. But at any rate, you can see that I am continuing to wrap the nautical rope around. I had seen something online somewhere, I honestly don't recall where I saw it, that inspired me to do this. And I just thought it was going to be perfect for this coastal farmhouse video. So just working my way around, and when I get to the end, I'm cutting the rope at a bit of an angle, and I'm doing my best to keep it from fraying. I want to try and have it just kind of meld back into the rope on the row below it. And I'm ending this in the same area, vertically speaking, as what I had started. So just below there at the base is where I had actually started as well. So now I have this moss from actually I got it at Michael's, and I thought it looked like coral. So I thought it was so fun. I was excited to find it. I dropped in some sand also from Michael's, but I know you can get sand at the Dollar Tree, depending on whether your Dollar Tree carries it. Dropping in some shells that I also had gotten from the Dollar Tree. And you can decorate this with little starfish if you have them, or whatever floats your boat. You know, if you have sea glass, that would probably be really pretty in here as well. And then I'm just going to drop in some of my different colored moss, because again, I thought it looked like coral, and just giving it a little bit of like a sea vibe. Driftwood would probably be really pretty in here as well. I would just say use your imagination. And I did want to use a real candle, but I seem to be out of little pillar candles in my stash. I'm going to have to hit up Dollar Tree again soon. So I just have my little wireless candle, battery powered candle there. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 3.
All right, I have a Dollar Tree heart cutout thing, one of those little Dollar Tree crates, I'm gonna call it, and then these little words. It came in a pack of like 5 or 6, and yes, it says welcome fall on it, but that's okay. We're going to use our X-Acto knife, and this is a cork backed ruler, which I'm hoping will help keep it from sliding when I'm trying to do this under here. And I'm just literally going to score that solid line of wood. It's like, I think it's called balsa wood. So it's really pretty easy to cut down. I'm just going to score it multiple times. I probably scored it about 20 times, and eventually I was able to get through. And so I'm going to set the fall piece aside for someday in the future, and I'm just going to use the welcome. Now I'm getting out my chalk paints. I've got ocean, pool, crystal, agave, and then celery, but I was trying to decide which one I did not want to use because I only wanted 4. And now I've also got rid of the celery for this particular project. So now I've got my Adirondack white, giving a like a light coat at first. I was thinking dry brush, and then I was like, you know what? I don't like that the wood looks so new under here. So I ultimately gave it just one good coat of white paint. I didn't bother painting that backside that I'm holding right there, because eventually we're going to be gluing that to the heart-shaped piece. So Whenever I'm going to be gluing something like that, I try to leave the wood unpainted because it'll just help with the adhesion. And now I am taking my little welcome sign. I'm using the ocean chalk paint on here. Afterwards, I was wishing instead of ocean, I had grabbed the Nantucket blue because that's also a really great color. But now I've got my mineral chalk paint, and this is what I'm wishing I had done with the little crate before I painted it white. But I'm just going to do opposite, right? So I'm kind of distressing, for lack of a better term. I'm aging. There you go. That's really what I was trying to say. I'm going to try and just age the wood a little bit. So I'm using it a bit, kind of more like a stain. And now with this little crate that's been painted white, I'm just going to dry brush some of the mineral chalk paint on here just to help distress it a little bit. And then I'm going to do the opposite on the heart. I'm going to be using a dry brush. This is actually the silver lining chalk paint that I'm coming in with right now. And then I'm using pool on that other section right there. Actually, was it silver lining? No, not silver lining. That first one was crystal. Sorry, not silver lining. It was crystal, then pool, then the agave at the bottom, and now I'm using ocean. And so now I've got my wood glue. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of hot glue for that instant bond, but the wood glue will give that permanent hold. Sorry for my head in the shot there. And then I'm going to add my little welcome sign on the front. Now, this was inspired by one of my sweet subscribers, Sarah. She did this a few weeks ago and shared it with me. It was a shout out, and she asked if I might try to recreate one of her projects and put my own twist on it. So this is per Sarah's request. So thank you so much, Sarah, for the idea. I thought your project was super cute, and I was more than happy to give it a go. And now you've seen I've just cut down some floral foam. I'm dropping a whole bunch of hot glue in the bottom of my crate and securing the foam down inside of there. And then I'm going to be grabbing those lavender pieces in just a minute. Those are from the Walmart. So now I had grabbed my regular Dollar Tree moss, but then decided I wanted to use some of the colored moss again instead. I started tucking that down in there, and then I realized, you know what, it was going to use up a lot of moss, and the moss from Michael's is a lot more expensive than the Dollar Tree moss. Obviously, the Dollar Tree moss is like $1.25, and the moss that I had from Michael's, I think it was half off, but still, I think even half off, it was like $3, right? So I tucked in the Dollar Tree moss first. And now I am just adding in some of the different colored moss all around the top. Now, if I had to do this over again, you can see I'm going around the foam because I'm thinking, oh, I want to leave that open for my picks, and thinking my picks are going to cover that. Well, if I had to do it over again, I would have put moss all over the top surface of the foam. And I probably would have worried less about the sides. I wouldn't have worried about tucking moss down in along the sides. Because you're going to see in a little bit, once I have the picks in there, I'm like, oh, I can see the floral foam, and then I'll start like sticking moss inside of there to cover up the foam in between the picks. So this is one instance where you can learn from my mistake and go ahead and cover it with moss first, and then add your picks in. And your picks should be able to go in right, through the moss without a problem. But I've just got 2 picks here that I'm using, and true to form, I am cutting them all down and just using the little individual picks and just tucking them in wherever it looks nice to my eye. As I always say, do what makes your heart happy. Crafting should be fun and it should make you smile. So whatever looks good to you is exactly what it needs to be. And all of this can just be taken as inspiration, right? So just as Sarah inspired me, her piece was more in pinks and purples. I put a coastal twist on this. So perhaps you have a different style, but you can envision the colors that you would want to use for this. Do whatever makes you happy, but let me know what you think.
DIY number 4.
So I have this sweater that I absolutely love, but I managed to get stains on the elbows. Goodness only knows what I leaned into, but it was on both elbows and I could not get it out. So we're gonna DIY with it. I am just cutting the sweater along the seams because I wanted to have a nice flat area that I could work with. So I'm gonna tuck those other little pieces away for future DIYs. But now I am taking the piece that I cut out and I am folding it up. Folded it in quarters, just trying to get it all nice and flat. I am keeping the shorter edges on the outside so that I can see where they are, so that when I cut this in a second, I won't end up, having a really weird shape. So I'm cutting it kind of at a little bit of a curve to attempt a circle. It does not need to be perfect. It is not perfect, and that's okay, but we've got a general round shape here. So I have these needles that I picked up at Joann's a while back. They were called doll needles, so it's got a nice large eye for the needle, and then the needle itself is about 4 inches long. So that was going to work out really well for what I'm trying to do here. I am using some of this twine that I had picked up at Habitat for Humanity. It's a little thicker than what I need, so I'm just pulling it apart. I wanted something that was going to be nice and strong because in the past when I have worked on projects like this, my thread has not been strong enough and it ended up snapping on me. So I am trying to save myself the pain and trying to decide if I'm coming in from the inside or the outside. I ultimately decided on coming in from the inside because that's where ultimately I want my knot to be so that I can tuck my ends in and hide them. This is super easy, even if you are not a sewer. It's just a simple in and out and in and out. I've got this sped up about 3 times, you guys, so do not let it intimidate you if you are not a sewer. This is something anybody can do. So I'm just kind of gathering it up on my needle. You don't have to do that. I just had the length of the needle and I figured it would be faster to do it this way. So once my needle was all full, then I would just pull off the knitting or the fabric, whatever you want to call this, and slide my twine through so you can see the stitch work that's happening there. And that will not show later. That will be completely hidden. So I am going to do that all the way around the perimeter of my circle, and then I am going to kind of straighten out my ends, if you will. So I tied a knot in the end of that tail, and I'm just kind of evening everything out. I want 2 tails, so I'm pulling out that beginning end. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm just going to go ahead and stuff this with fiber fill. I like to kind of floof up my fiber fill before I stuff things, so that's what I was doing there. And then once I get it to the level that I want, I'm going to pull my strings tight and go ahead and I'm going to tie those off. And you might need to just kind of help the fabric slide further down on the twine or the thread that you're using, because sometimes it just kind of gets a little jammed up when it gets super thick like that. So tying it off in a knot and tucking my ends into the inside of my little pumpkin. So it doesn't quite look like a pumpkin yet, but we'll get there. So I'm taking some of that twine that I had cut off before, and I'm taking another single layer of it and putting a really large knot in the end of that because I want to make sure it is not going to pull through my fabric when I do this. So, because I'm going to be pulling on it quite a bit. So I stuck my needle straight down through and pulled it around and then went back through again, and now I'm pulling tight. So you see how I did that? And then I'm going to do it again on the opposite side and stick it right down through. And every time I go back down through the center, I am going right next to where I've been working, but I am not going back through the same hole because especially with that first hole that I made, I don't want to enlarge it to the point where my knot ends up being able to slip through. So I'm working in that same general little 1/4 inch area, but I'm making a new hole every time I go through. I don't know if what I'm saying is, I don't know if what I did would make a difference or not, but it made me feel better about what I was doing, that I was going to be a little bit more secure. Now, I had run out of my length of twine, so I had added on some more, and I'm just going to keep sectioning this off until I have 6 sections. And it was right about here that my memory card on my camera ran out of memory, and I did not realize it, and so I didn't know that it didn't continue to record. So at least you can see here my sections, and then I will show you in a second how I finished it. So this is the finished product. So I've got a couple of shells that I pulled out of this pack from Dollar Tree, and then I had these little birch wood pieces also from the Dollar Tree in my stash, and then I used a little bit more twine. So I just used hot glue and tucked that little birch stem down inside that opening hole. Sorry, I'm a little off screen there. And then I hot glued some of the shells there to serve as our little leaves. And then I made just a regular tie your shoe bow. Now I'm showing you the bottom just so you can see how nice and neat it was. I did consider using the bottom as my top, but ultimately decided that I wanted to do it this way. But you can do it however you choose and with whatever colors you choose and whatever embellishments. I hope this gives you a little bit of inspiration.
DIY number 5.
All right, I have seashells and a starfish, some craft wood from the Dollar Tree, my jute cord from Walmart that clearly I need to get more of. And this is a couple of canvases that I picked up from Five Below. It was a 2-pack, and I believe these are 11 by 14? 11 by 14. So I had gotten them out, but I went ahead and set them aside because I want to get my wood all set first. Little ladybug, thank you for the cleanup. Cut these all down to, I'm trying to remember how long they were. I think it was 8 inches. Yes, 8 inches. My craft wood was originally 18 inches in length, and I have, so I got 2 pieces out of each of these. But I was just showing you that I was using my Provincial blue as well as my Adirondack white chalk paints, getting all of my wood pieces set up. I'm going to be doing 6 of them in the blue and 4 of them with the white. But first I'm just sanding off those edges where I had sanded them. I probably should have done that before I vacuumed up the sawdust, but whatever works. So I'm using a baby wipe. You've probably seen me do this in the past because I just want to use this more as a stain than a heavy coat of paint. I want these to look weathered. This is supposed to be beachy, right? So looking weathered, I want the wood grain to show through. And so that's what I opted to do for the white. Now for the blue, I'm going to do the same thing, but first I'm just hitting it up with the residue, whatever's left on my baby wipe. That's what I'm using right now. So you can see there's a difference. It's knocking down that yellow in the wood a little bit, but it's not like white, right? And now I'm coming in, I'm using the same baby wipe with the blue. And this does not need to be perfect. Imperfection is our friend with this because, again, I want it to look weathered. I want it to look rustic, beachy. So I am not trying to make these perfect, and they're not going to have complete coverage. If you prefer complete coverage, you do you. If you want different colors, absolutely go for it. This was actually something that was inspired by, well, the first one's actually a dupe. Right, and then the second one was inspired by, because I'll explain that in a little bit. But I set those aside to dry, and now I'm going to go ahead and prepare my canvases. So I wanted to get the, or I should say my frames. I wanted to get the canvases off of the frames because I want to use just the wood frame part. And as I did this, I was thinking, you know what, I really don't want those staples on there. So I decided ultimately that it was going to be easier for me to just take the staples off immediately. So I grabbed my little flathead screwdriver and I was using that to leverage the staples out. And then I came back in with my needle nose pliers. I was able to just pull those right out of there. So it takes a little bit of effort, but for me, it's worth it. So I've got both of my frames set and ready, and now I've got my jute cord, and I'm just showing you here that if you don't have a drill or don't want to mess with drilling holes, you can certainly tie this here, but in the picture that I was inspired by, or the one that I was duping, they had it going through the frame and tied in knots. So I'm just looking for a drill bit that I can use that's going to be about the same width as my jute cord. So I'm getting that all hooked up in my drill, and I'm just trying to figure out if I can, I want to make sure that my drill holes are straight, right? And so I'm trying to figure out how I can make that happen by keeping the drill as straight as possible. So first of all, I'm just going to mark these off. I'm finding the center. So here you can see this is 14 inches. I marked it at 7. And now I'm just lining these up, and I'm going to mark, I'm using the original measured mark to mark the other. And I flip the one over, mark that, flip the other one over. Catch what I'm doing here? So I only had to measure once, but I was able to mark all of them. So measuring the other one, this was 11 inches. So I'm going to mark it off at about 5.5. Once I mark it, I just double check. Sorry, I'm a little out of frame there, but I did double check. And then I went ahead and did the same thing, marking everything by flipping it over. I think you get the idea of what I'm doing here. So once I had everything marked, I was, again, trying to figure out how to get these to the right height so that I could leave the drill on the table and just drill right into it. So I want to make sure that I'm not going to drill anywhere near my hand. So I've got it all lined up here, and I'm able to just push it in from the other side. And that worked like a charm. So I went ahead and I continued to do that for all 8 holes total, right? So 4 holes on each frame, and that worked just well, just perfectly well. And then I went ahead and sanded up the little holes because the wood did splinter a little bit here and there, but nothing serious. And now I am using my little baby wipe technique with the white paint, just giving this a light coat of the paint so that it's matching up with other pieces. And now these are all dry, and I am going to glue them together with my Gorilla wood glue. So it looked like I was putting a lot on there. I was actually scraping a lot of it away. You don't need a lot of wood glue, and in fact, if you put on too much, it's just going to ooze out between your pieces, and it just kind of gets a little bit messy. I mean, it's easy enough to wipe away, but I don't know. I try to just avoid having it ooze to begin with. And I do this on parchment because I find that it doesn't stick to the parchment paper. Unlike other, like if you had craft paper underneath it, you basically would end up with craft paper on the back of your project. So that's what I did. Now these, obviously, clearly, magic of YouTube, these are already dry. They had been set aside for a while to dry, and now I'm going to go ahead and get my frames ready for them. So I've got my jute cord. I am kind of twisting it through the hole. It was a little wide in this particular section of the cord, so I had to get creative there. At some points I did use some hot glue to put on the tip. Here I'm just trying to find a thinner part of the jute cord that might be able to, get through there a little bit easier. There are a lot of different things that you can do, but clearly here I went ahead and I put a little bit of the hot glue on there. I probably could have made these holes a little bit larger, and then it would have been a little bit easier, but I was also conscious of the fact that I was going to be tying knots to keep them in place, and I didn't want the holes to be too big because then my knots wouldn't hold either. So I've struggled with it a little bit here and there because even with that hot glue, then it made my jute cord a little bit too wide, so I was kind of like having to mess with it. But ultimately I got it all thread through, and I did that on each of the pieces. So going across like this, and then I'll show you in a second how I did it going the opposite direction. So it kind of made it look like a window frame, but I'm just tying that off, making sure my knot is really nice and tight, and then trimming off the excess. Pulled that other one through and just made sure that it was as tight going across the frame as possible, because that's what's going to be supporting our decoration piece. So those wooden slats, as well as the embellishments that we're going to use. So going ahead and getting this strung, and I'm only going to show you on this one, and then I will do the other one off camera. But again, just getting it all strung across. trimming that off, making sure it's long enough that I can get it through there, and then also tie the knot in it. My little hole was a little bit closed off for me, so I just used, I think it was a pencil or something that I used to just make sure my hole was open. Here I go with my little hot glue trick again and threading that through, and that time it worked well for me. So again, just pulling that nice and taut, tying the knot off, and there we're good for our embellishments. So I'm gonna go ahead and make sure that all of my stuff is ready there. Okay, so we've got our little, I don't know what to even call this at this point. It's, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. Our wood slats, I don't know. But anyway, I realized that it was best to flip it upside down and measure it that way. I tried putting some hot glue in the middle of it. And then as I'm doing this, I'm also thinking, you know what? Hot glue doesn't always really hold well to wood. So I need another, you know, system of support with this one. So I pulled out my staple gun, sorry about my head there. Here I'm just measuring, making sure everything is nice and even and centered. But I'm going to go ahead and pull out my staple gun in a second, and I'm just going to staple it in 2 places on either side of each cord. Hopefully you get what I mean, because you can see what I'm doing here. And then I just knocked those staples in with my hammer, and apparently I'm moving everything on earth. While I do that, I didn't even realize I had done that. And now I'm going to apply my little starfish friend to the center of this. I think this is so sweet. I love this. I'm going to be giving these to my friend Rebecca, who loves the beach and everything beachy. But I love that so much. So now I'm going to go ahead, as I promised, I did the other one off camera, and now I'm doing the shells. So the inspiration picture had one giant shell in the middle. I don't have a single giant shell, so I'm using multiple shells, and I was trying to figure out how I wanted to do this, how many shells I wanted, how many rows, you know, should I, you know, do it the way that I had it? Should I, you know, do 3 rows of the shells, 3 rows of 3, so with the 9. And as I watch this back, I kind of like that better than what I ultimately did, but I ultimately ended up just doing what I showed you originally with the 7 seashells. But let me know what you would do. I mean, if without having one giant shell to put in the center of this, would you do what I did? But I'm applying some hot glue to the inside edges of the shells because I don't want it to be seen from the outside, right? So I'm going to show you close up here on the inside edges, because I know when I flip it over and put it on my piece, that glue is going to ooze down onto the wood, and it worked like a charm. But here they are. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 6.
All right, I have these little bamboo hoops from the Dollar Tree and a whole bunch of shells. I think I told you a while back that I had a plan for this. So I am going to take a whole bunch of shells, my drill, I've got a scrap piece of wood, and I'm gonna drill a little hole at the top of each of these shells. I ended up doing, and the drill bit went right through it. I was amazed. Even some of these others that were like super fine, yeah. But I did this with, I think it was close to 150 shells, something like that. I don't know. I think I had 16 rows or strands of 11 shells each. So actually it's more than, what is that, 176? I think I did the math right in my head. But that's about how many shells I've got here that I did this for. And now I am just kind of separating them by size, because I'm going to want to put my largest shells at the top and then have my smaller shells towards the bottom. And then I have those special ones over on the left off to the side, and I'm going to be using those at the bottom of each row. And then I've got a few extras of those, so they'll be spliced somewhere in the middle the rows as well. But at any rate, now I am grouping these into 16 separate groups. So I'm spreading out the different sizes equally amongst my groups. Yeah, I'm probably being a little bit more over the top than necessary, but I don't know. It was just how I had it envisioned. So now I have a fishing line that my sweet husband Rich picked up for me because I was like, help, I need this. And he grabbed it while he was out and about. And I am tying off my largest shell first. I left a length of about 8 inches off the end, and then I'm using the long end to attach the rest of the shells. And I'm leaving maybe like a 1/4 inch of space between shells as they hang. So that's why you'll see me continue to like kind of lift this up, making sure that all the shells are hanging so that there's a little bit of space between them so they're not hitting each other. And then as I did more rows, I'm just measuring to see if I've got them all kind of lined up the same. Hopefully that makes sense, because I'm going to be doing 16 of these and I want them all to be about the same. So this is them all done. They're all strung. I just did simple knots down the fishing line with them. And now I'm going to attach them to my hoops. So the smaller hoop I'm doing first, and I'm going to be tying 8 of my strands onto the small hoop, and then I will tie the other 8 onto my larger hoop. And I found the best way to do this for me was to wrap the fishing line around the hoop a couple of times and then tie it off. It just seemed to give it a little bit more stability and helped keep it from slipping as I was trying to tie the knot. So that would be my recommendation. And then I just spread them out evenly all the way around the hoop once I had all 8 of them on there. So I did that with both of them, and once I had everything attached to both hoops, I went ahead, I'm just checking it again, but then I'm going to go ahead and grab the smaller hoop, and I'm going to drop all those shells right down through the center of the bigger hoop. So you can see they're both together now. And then I am going to grab a chain from the Dollar Tree that is usually used for their hanging planters. And I'm going to use this to hang it. And I was trying to figure out the best way to do this, but I think I was actually pretty creative in doing this. So I'm threading it underneath the small inner hoop, and then I'm going to attach it to the outer hoop. So when I lift this up, the smaller hoop will essentially sit on top of the chain, but it won't be able to go anywhere because the chain spreads out below it to attach to the larger hoop. Hopefully that makes sense. You'll see in a second what I'm talking about, but it actually worked out really, really well. Now I got this attached on here and then decided I really didn't want it to be black, and honestly I completely had forgotten because I had always intended to paint it, but I was so excited to see if this was going to work. And I know you can't see it I was off screen there just because this is so large, but I will have pictures for you to see it at the end, so you can see how, there it is. And yeah, that's after I painted the chain. But let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 7.
So this is a Dollar Tree foam pumpkin. I've got my crystal Waverly chalk paint, and I am going to be cutting into this carvable pumpkin. I think I've seen Jessica Lynn from Jessica Lynn at Home do something similar. I think she did an arrangement like this last year. I think it was Jessica, but I might be mistaken. So, and if you are not familiar with her, you will want to check her out. She is fantastic. But I'm just prepping my pumpkin probably could have done that more safely, so just be careful if you're going to carve these things. Giving it 2 good coats of my crystal chalk paint and getting it all set. Once it's dry, I've got my Dollar Tree picks that I'm going to use, as well as a pool noodle, and I'm just going to cut off a little section of the pool noodle to use as floral foam. It is denser than floral foam. It's a little harder to work with, but it's definitely doable and more economical because you get a lot more of it for $1. So using a whole bunch of hot glue, I'm going to secure that down into the bottom of my pumpkin shell, and now I'm going to come in with my picks. And if you've watched my channel for any amount of time, you know I love to cut apart my picks. I just find that it's easier to work with them, and I can kind of get them to do more of what I want if I'm working with them in smaller pieces. So I'm working around the very base of the edge of my pumpkin vase, if you will. And so I'm starting out with all these cute little leaves. I found these when I was at Dollar Tree with my friend Devin, Freckled Mom. I was up in Boston on vacation, and she and I got together because she lives in that area. It was so fun to meet her, and we were so excited to see these little leaves. That was where we found them. And I'll be doing a haul at some point with all of the goodies that I found while I was up there. But for now, I'm going to use them in my project. So I've also got these blue hydrangeas that I'm tucking in. And I am starting from the outside and working my way in. And as I go, I'm also going to be building up the center. So starting low at the edges and then working my way in and building it up taller at the middle. So that's where I'm starting to build this a little bit here with some more of the leaves, and then I'll go ahead and layer in some more of the hydrangea. And again, this is something where you can use whatever colors you want. If you are not into the blues and the whites, you could totally use regular traditional fall colors. You can use whatever flowers you want. The only limit is your imagination, right? So please take this as inspiration and create something that is going to make your heart happy. I'm now using these little flocked balls to add a little bit more interest. I think they are so cute. I heard Sammy from Unicorn Dust Designs talking about them, and I was so excited when I saw them up in New England, so I had to grab them. I just think that they are so cute. And I think the tag said flocked balls. I don't know if that's the technical term for them. I don't know what exactly they are supposed to be, but I think they are super fun and super cute. And so I decided to pop them in here and go with it. And you'll notice that the greenery on the stems, I do slide that up. I like to keep a lot of the leaves and the greenery on at times, just to kind of give it a little bit more fullness and just a little bit more dimension. So I'll just slide those up a little bit to help the arrangement. And there you go. There she is. I love this, and I hope you do too.
DIY number 8.
This is my inspiration. The anchor on the left is what I'm going to be aiming for. I don't know if you guys noticed that. It was like $149 to $249. Say what? So I've got a Dollar Tree picture that I am going to take apart here, and this is probably smaller than what those prints were. I imagine those prints were much larger, but we're going to do a smaller version, and it's only going to cost us a couple of dollars. So I am prepping my frame. I'm just sliding some paper in between the glass and the frame so that I can go ahead and paint this. This particular, and I'm using my Adirondack white chalk paint. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm using my silver lining chalk paint for this. These frames, the one that I'm using now, I'm using my Adirondack white, and I'm just going to paint the back side of the insert that was in here. So sorry, what I was going to say was that a lot of times the glass will come out of the frames from Dollar Tree, but this particular one had some foam around the side because it had a little bit of a gap to allow for like a bump up, if that makes any sense whatsoever. I'm not sure, but it was easier to leave the glass in, which is why I did it the way that I did. So I was showing you before my little joy that I love cutting out this image that I had found just on the Cricut Design Space. It was already designed. All I had to do was select it, add it, and tell it to cut it. It was so simple. And I am just going to apply this to my white backing that I'd painted with the Adirondack white. And I'm going to go ahead and burnish it, make sure everything is nice and adhered. You see my daughter Elena just dropped off some dinner for me. Sorry about that. So yeah, multitasking is a way of life for me. But I'm going ahead and popping this back into the frame, and I am going to be covering the back of it, you guys. So I just wanted to make sure I did clean this before, and I'm just identifying some other places that needed some cleaning. But if you are going to seal it like this, you do want to just make sure you clean the inside of your glass before you do this, because then it just becomes that much more difficult to take care of it later. But this is just regular craft paper. I am cutting out a square, and I am going to glue it to the back just to make things nice and clean. You probably noticed earlier that I had taken out the little claw tooth hanger, and I'm going to just pop that right back in again. Those pop in and out really pretty easily on the Dollar Tree frames. I kind of bent it a little bit, so I'm just fixing it there. And I'm just going to press it right back in. I think because these frames, they might actually just be a really dense foam. I do not think they're wood, which is probably why they are so inexpensive. But using my hot glue, making sure that is all nice and sealed down, and then we are all done. I love this piece. Love it. I hope you love it too.
DIY number 9.
All right, this is a Dollar Tree wreath form in the form of a starfish and a bunch of Dollar Tree ribbon. I believe each of these rolls had 9 feet of ribbon on it, and I honestly had no concept as to how much ribbon I was going to need for doing what I'm doing. Let me just say, it takes a lot of ribbon. A lot of ribbon. I didn't have nearly enough. I had maybe, and this might even be off, I might have had a quarter of what I actually needed. I might not have even had that much. But I used up all of those rolls, and then I was like, you know what, I need reinforcements. And so I grabbed some other ribbon that I had in my stash that I thought would complement these ribbons. So I've got a kind of semi-sheer ribbon. It's like sheer in the middle with satin on either side and the white. And then I had a sheer blue ribbon that I was using. And so I had moved some of my ties to different places on the wreath, as you can see here, just trying to get everything a little bit more balanced, and just added in as much ribbon until, if I'm again completely honest, I was getting impatient with it. So you can totally fill in the entire wreath form with bows, and if you use wider ribbon, it obviously will cover a larger surface than using the small ribbon. So that might have been something that I should have considered, but this turned out actually really fun. It's a little bit unique, but I've got my jute cord now from Walmart, and I am going to go ahead and I'm kind of like finger crocheting it around that center hoop, if you will. So I'm just basically creating a loop, sticking my jute twine through it again, pulling it tight, and then I've got another loop, and I'm just kind of continuing around because I didn't want to commit to tying or cutting the jute just then, but then I ultimately had to. I ran out of options, so I cut off a whole length of it, and then I was kind of just struggling with weaving it in and out through the wreath form. So I finally was able to kind of bunch it up, and I got a better system going with tucking it in and through. But I'm basically going around each of the lines, the wires. So if you ever made like a God's eye when you were a kid, you know, I was kind of doing that. So if you recall how you would go around the sticks, wrap it around, continue on to the next one, wrap it around, continue. That's what I'm doing with this. Hopefully that's a good explanation. You know what I'm talking about. But I think they might have also been called dream catchers or something. I can't remember. But yeah, I continued to just kind of weave it around here all the way to the point where those shorter wires ended. And then I went ahead and I tied it off in the back. I actually had a perfect amount of jute twine for this. Might have been able to use like 1 more inch to help tie it off, but I'm just attaching it to the starting piece. And then this tie off actually was able to serve as a hanger as well. So that worked out perfectly. So just gonna tie that off. And then once that was all done, I did feel like it needed a little something extra. So I'm just cleaning up my mess here because that jute twine likes to shed a lot. So grabbing another little shell, applying a whole bunch of hot glue to the inside of the shell. I'm sorry, it's out frame. And then just applying it to the center. And I've got my cute little farmhouse starfish coastal thing for my front door. I hope you like this. I think it's super cute and super whimsical, but let me know what you think. And yeah, so fun. A little crazy, but fun. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 10.
So for this project, I have the Waverly chalk paint and pool, the same in ocean, and then I have my home decor white Adirondack and a whole bunch of pumpkins from the Dollar Tree. Now you can see here I have them all divided out in groups of 3, and I am giving them 2 good coats of chalk paint. So I'm starting out with the pool, and then I'm going to move on to the ocean. And then once I have those done, I am gonna go ahead and try to come up with a mid-range color by mixing those 2 together. So I've got my pool I'm putting in there, and then my ocean, and then whoops, I got a little too much ocean on my tree. But I just went with it, and I blended in just part of that chalk paint. And I ended up using the other for my second coat on the dark blue. So it all worked out. But once I had that all done, I went ahead and did the same thing with the pool and the white to try to lighten that up a little bit, so that I would have a lighter shade of that, because I'm kind of trying to go with an ombre sort of effect, if you will, with my pumpkins that will be displayed together. And then I just came in with my brushed metal. This is by Folk Art, and I painted up all this little stems. So cute.
DIY number 11.
So this is my inspiration. It was on sale for $122, normally $149. I have this old lamp. This is also like a thrift flip, you guys, because this lamp was in my house growing up as like a toddler, an infant. I think my parents probably had it even before I was even born. And my brother recently gave it to me. He'd had it in storage in his basement, I think, but I got it all cleaned up, and now I'm showing you that I'm using a hula skirt from I guess this is like a hula skirt, grass skirt, whatever you want to call it, from the Dollar Tree. I'm sectioning off 9 of these strands, and I'm going to leave it on that rope for right now just because it will help to hold it while I am braiding it. So I'm going to leave it on there, and I'm going to braid it all the way down the length of the grass strands. So I've got 3 strands in each section, and it's actually more like 6 because these are doubled over also. So once I get down to the bottom, I am going to go ahead and twist that up a little bit, use some hot glue. I'm going to bend it over on itself. Please be careful when you're doing this that you don't burn yourself. I did get out my finger protectors. Thank you, Sarah, in just a minute, just to make sure that that I wasn't burning myself, because hot glue can be rough, you guys. So just make sure that you're careful there. So I folded that up, made sure it was secure, and then I took my little end off of the twine. I cut that down, and I'm sealing up, sorry, I'm a little out of frame, sealing up the other end with some hot glue, and I'm going to bend that over as well and just make sure that my ends are nice and clean and finished. So then I am going to start wrapping it around the base of my lamp. And I did this one strand at a time because I wasn't sure how much I was going to need. And so I just kind of continued to create the braids as I went. So of course the skirt is kind of like attacking me there. Finally, we'll move it out of the way in a second, but just using a little bit of hot glue where necessary and working my way up the lamp. So here I'm coming in with another braided strand. I'm not going to put you through all of the braiding and all of the wrapping. You can see what I'm doing here. It's pretty straightforward. And so I took it all the way up to the top. I did leave this shade as is. The shade has definitely seen better days, but I think it serves its purpose for this particular DIY. I do plan on redoing the shade on a future video, so you'll want to come back and visit with me again soon so that you can see what I do to the shade. And that'll be a separate video. But I decided, and I know this isn't like the inspiration picture, but I decided I wanted to add something that was going to make it a little bit more nautical. So I have these awesome starfish, and I just added one to either side. I felt like it also helped to take up space on that base. I love this, and I hope you love it too.
DIY number 12.
Okay, you guys, this is what I have not done in about 35 years. And this shade is actually even older than that. It's over 50 years old. It is time for it to have a makeover. So the first thing that I am going to do is I am going to use my craft knife very carefully, and I'm going to remove it from the frame. And the reason that I am doing that is because I want to reuse the frame, you know, upcycling. We're going to give this a makeover. So I'm very carefully going to remove everything from the frame. I'm not worried about the tape that's on here. It's kind of crumbly, and I don't care about that so much. So because that's not critical to what we need to do, but I am concerned about the shade part itself. I want to keep that as intact as possible, because we're going to be using that as our pattern to create our new lampshade. So I've got the frame removed now, and I'm just going to clean up my surface, setting the frame aside for a moment, and I am going to do my best to try and get the rest of this taken care of and opened up. And I was a little bit on the struggle bus here. The glue on this puppy was really holding tight, and I did not want to use my heat gun on this because this is a little bit of I want to say plastic. I don't know what exactly this is made out of, but I was honestly afraid that I would melt it and warp it and shrink it, and I need it to stay in as close to its present shape as possible. Hopefully that makes sense. So I finally was able to get in there a little bit. If you do decide to redo a frame, just be real careful, or not a frame, a shade, just be real careful. And listen, if you don't have a shade you want to rip apart, we can hook you up elsewhere, in another way. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking, but I'll explain that in a minute. Now, I did go ahead and paint my frame just because I wanted it nice and clean and new-ish, but that's not necessary if you don't want to do that. So I'm taking my pattern and I am using my lampshade paper that my new friend Colby up at the lamp shop in New Hampshire set me up with, among other things. I'll be showing you some of the other stuff that Colby sent my way. But I had reached out to him for assistance because I haven't done this in quite some time, and I still have some items in my stash, but not everything that I need. So I went ahead and I traced out my shade pattern, and I've cut it down now. And so I'm just getting it ready for the next step, checking out the shape of it. It's looking good. And that curved area, that's the top. So here are some lampshade how-to books that Colby sent my way. This is awesome, right? So if you've never done this before and you want to learn, these are step-by-step guides. These are a bunch of designs that Colby sent my way. I wanted to do something that was coastal, and so I was just looking through the different things that I had there to pick out the image that I wanted to work with. And here's another lampshade construction book. My aunt is the one who taught me how to do this. My Aunt Cindy. Thank you, Aunt Cindy, if you're listening. And she used to make the most beautiful paneled shades with dried flowers and just gorgeous, beautiful work. But at any rate, I've got my design here that I'm going to use, my little sailboat, and I have a piece of graphite paper from Arteza, and I'm going to go ahead and tuck this behind my image with the graphite side facing my white lampshade paper. And I'm just going to trace my image. You just want to make sure that your design is lined up the way that you want it to appear on the shade. You want to make sure that it's nice and straight. Now you could also put down a piece of wax paper over this, or a piece of tracing paper if you want to keep your image nice and neat and clean. It's also a really easy way to see where you might have missed in tracing your design. So in my case, I just went ahead and kept lifting it up every once in a while to check and see if there was anything that I missed. Once I had it all on here, I went ahead and I wanted to add one more little bird. At first I thought I was going to be able to see my tracing through the paper, and then I decided, yeah, I can't really see it well enough. So I flipped over the graphite paper so it's facing my yellow sheet now, and I'm tracing the little bird again, and so now he is appearing on the back of my page. Hopefully that makes sense. So now I've got my little bird. I'm going to add him to the image as well. And the reason I did it that way, I wanted him facing the other way. So yeah. So once I have my image all transferred over, oh, I'm showing you, this is the glass that I used to cut on. That was in my stash. It was kind of dirty, sorry. It's literally been sitting, put away for like 35 years. So I'm going to be using my self-healing mat. To be honest, and I'm breaking off my little razor blade tip there because it's got notches in it for a new blade. It's one of my Dollar Tree craft knives, and I just want to make sure I had a really sharp point. If you want to do this, I highly recommend getting an X-Acto knife, craft knife, because that is going to have a much finer point and make this much easier. And if I had to do it again, I might actually pull out that piece of glass and cut on the glass instead of on the self-healing mat, because I feel like the glass allows you to slide a little bit more easily and glide across what you're doing, whereas I felt like I was getting a little bit caught up in the mat. So if you decide that you'd like to try this, you might want to consider using a piece of glass to cut on versus the mat. Now, when you're cutting this out, you want to make sure, think of it as a stencil. So if you created a stencil, remember you need to have parts of that stencil plastic or whatever you want to call it left intact, right? Otherwise your whole stencil is going to fall apart. Same principle here. We do not want to cut any holes to like have a large gap in our shade, right? So all of these lines are strategically placed so that we don't end up with holes, like gaping holes in our shade. So it's all dashed lines. There are a lot of dots that are used in pierce and cut lampshades. So just keep that in mind as you are cutting out your image, or if you decide to design your own image, you want to make sure that you have enough gaps that your image will remain intact. Hopefully that makes sense. So once I had all of my lines cut out, I'm coming back in with my piercing tool. And at this point I was remembering that when I used to do this, I usually pierced first. And I used to put like a little pillow underneath my piercing tool so that it would be able to go all the way through and not jab me. So if you decide to give this a shot, again, I probably would do that instead of the self-healing mat, because it would allow the little pierced holes to be slightly larger. And this was fine. It was just they were a little bit smaller than I normally would create them. So at this point, I'm going to use my same little piercing tool, and I'm tucking it into each of these little slits that I've created with my craft knife. And where I do have corners, so I'm going to kind of roll those up into the shade. So the side that we're looking at right now, this is going to be the inside of the lampshade. So we want everything to meld into the shade. You don't want anything sticking out on the outside of the shade. So all of these little rounded edges, we're going to mold them in, and you don't want to crease them. You don't want them there to be like a fold. So you're really just sculpting them and helping them to open up a little bit, because that's what's going to let the light through, and that's what's going to make your image really shine and glow and be beautiful. So now with all of my artist friends, you all are always reminding me to sign my work. So you can do the same thing with your little lampshade. I used to just put my initials on my shades, but in this instance I decided I was going to do Corie, so I am just trying to figure out how to do that backwards, because remember, this is the inside of the shade, so I'm checking to make sure I did it right. So just keep that in mind when you are adding your initials. So now this is a heavy tracing paper. This is something else that I got from the lamp shop. So thank you so much, Colby. And I am just cutting down a piece to size. Now I should have left it there. I'm showing you the quick glue. This is exclusively from the lamp shop, and it's a great tacky glue that helps bond different surfaces together, and it dries relatively quickly, so it's really great. So I should have left the tracing paper there, because everything was curling up on me a little bit here, and it didn't occur to me until after I had all the glue on here, that it might have made more sense to just do a little section at a time with my tracing paper, you know, there. So word of the wise, you might want to just work on it in sections. I have applied glue to the very edge all the way around my shade here. And this is where I'm like, oh boy, how am I going to do this without getting glue everywhere, right? So I just used a teeny little bit of Scotch tape on either side. I was just avoiding the glue. So on that side, because I didn't catch enough of it, because again, trying to avoid the glue. But I was able to just secure the very, very edges down. And that was sufficient for me to be able to work with it and get my tracing paper on. I'm struggling a little there. So went ahead, applied my tracing paper. Now keep in mind that you have this image that you have kind of popped up in the middle there. So you want to give enough room with this, so it's going to be a little poofy in the middle. It's not going to be something you're going to press flat onto your image, right? Especially because you want to have a little give for when you actually curl the frame or curl the shade around the frame again. You don't want it to crush your image. So give it a little bit of breathing room. Once it's completely dry, you're going to go ahead and you're going to trim off all of that tracing paper as close as you can get it to the edge of your shade. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and put it back on the frame. And man, 35 years trying to remember how I used to do all of these. I used to make so many of these. I loved them. We put them on the little chandelier lights, the candelabra light things, and on regular lamps. I love the way that these look. I just think that they are so pretty. But trying to remember how I did it so long ago, it was slowly coming back to me, but usually when I was halfway through what I was doing. So I did apply a little bit of glue there at the top edge, and here I'm just trying to figure out my best angle because I want to be able to get my clothespin on here, and I'm using the gap in the clothespin to my advantage, and then that is where I'm hooking it onto the frame. And we're getting the frame as close to the edge as we can. So hopefully that makes sense. You can see me applying more glue, and I'm just going to roll it over, and unfortunately you're not going to be able to see much more of what I'm doing here, but I'm just doing more of the same. I'm applying the glue, rolling the frame onto it, and then I am hooking it up with the clothespin to keep it secured until the glue dries. I'm going to do that all the way around the top frame. So once I do that, I actually ended up making a little bit of an oops, but I guess I'm going to show you the rest of getting this frame on here. So again, just right along the edge, just a little bead of glue, and then rolling that right down onto it and securing it with the clothespins. And the clothespins are great because they do have that gap, and so they hold it exactly as needed. They don't damage the shade unless you just want to be careful of how you place them, but they're great. And these are from the Dollar Tree too. So here I've got it all secured. Now this is where I made my little oopsie. I went ahead and I sealed the seam. Don't do that. Not until you have your bottom frame on, because I did make it a little too tight. And as I mentioned before, this glue does dry, I mean, not instantly, but it does dry relatively quickly. And so it was already starting to bond by the time I realized that I was having trouble with getting this frame on. So I'm just putting the frame on. I am not using glue on it at this point. I am just trying to get it in place, trying to tuck it in here, and eventually I did just pull that seam apart. Fortunately, I think I did it just in the nick of time, but once I had that in there, I went ahead and resealed the seam, and then I stood it up. Once I had the seam, solid, and I felt like it was good, I'm going to come in now on that edge that we didn't use glue, and I am going to add some glue right to the edge between the paper and not between, but because it's meeting directly, but think of it as caulk, like if you were to caulk your bathtub, right? So where the tile is meeting the tub, it's that little edge, and we're just going to seal it in there, and that's going to bind the frame with the shade. All right, so now this is after it's completely dry. You're going to want to let it dry probably for a good hour at least. If you're in a cooler, more humid environment, it might need a little bit longer. But I am going to go ahead and use this ribbon. This is a lampshade ribbon that I got from the lamp shop. Now, when I used to do my frames, I don't know why I keep wanting to call it a frame. When I used to do my shades, I used to use grosgrain ribbon. And I had tried different kinds of grosgrain that you could just get at the craft store. It does not work unless they have at least 40% cotton. A polyester grosgrain ribbon will not stick. I don't know why. Something about the polyester doesn't like the glue. And I didn't realize until just recently. I was reading Lake's Lampshades, her blog, and she actually warned of that. I was like, well, now that is why I could never get that to work. Apparently it needs to have cotton in it. So word to the wise, if you want to use grosgrain ribbon, you want to make sure that you are using ribbon with 40% cotton at least. Now, when I trimmed that, I made sure that it was going to butt right up against the starting edge. Hopefully that makes sense. And then I just used a little bit of glue on the edge to keep it from unraveling or fraying. So now we're going to roll this over. So I think I was remiss in telling you, when I applied this ribbon, I was only applying about a third of that edge to the shade. So I was using a little tiny bead of glue right along the edge and only using about a third of it on the outside of the shade. Now I'm coming in and it's kind of hard to see what I'm doing. You'll be able to see better in a little bit, but I'm using the nozzle on my little glue applicator to spread the glue evenly all over the inside of that ribbon, because we're going to now roll that over onto the frame and seal that up. And please, if you are feeling intimidated by this, please do not. I learned how to do this when I was in middle school. My Aunt Cindy taught me how to do this. If I can do it, you can do it, especially if I can do it now after 35 years and trying to remember what I'm doing. So you can definitely do this. It just takes a little time and a little patience with yourself. So here I am again, applying just the third to the outside edge, and here you can see how I was spreading that glue and rolling that down over the edge. Now, when you apply your frame, oh, and here is some velvet ribbon. This I did have in my stash. So this ribbon, and it's still in perfect condition, but it's about 35 years old, I think. And the velvet ribbon, you want to make sure that you get this lined up perfectly, because this is going to be your final step and your finishing edge. But what I was starting to say before with your frame, if you don't get it perfectly lined up with the edge of your lampshade paper, you might want to go back through there and just trim off with your X-Acto knife any overhang, and that's just going to help you when it comes time to apply that ribbon to the edge of your shade to finish it off, because otherwise it could get a little dicey with the paper being in the way. So again, cutting that off so that it butts up. You can see I'm trimming off a little bit more. The wonder of the velvet, because it's fuzzy, it helps to hide that seam. So you just want to make sure you get it as close as possible to matching up with that original edge. And that's it, you guys. We have a new lampshade. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 13.
So this is my inspiration. I love this little lighthouse. I was so excited to make this. I've got a Dollar Tree foam tree thing, I don't know, wood pile pieces from the Hobby Lobby, one larger one and one smaller one. The larger one came in a pack of 2. And then I'm going to be using one of those foam balls also from the Dollar Tree. I'm just going to need one of those round ones. And the smaller wood rounds, I believe, was a pack of 4. And I think both packs were $2.99. The 4-pack might have been $3.99, but I thought that was a good deal. So I am just taking a kitchen knife that I have now added to my crafting arsenal. And I cut the foam piece in, I guess I cut the top third off, and I'm just using my sanding block to make sure that it's nice and even and level. And then I'm going to do the same thing with the smaller piece, and you can see how I'm just planning on stacking it. So I'm kind of building my little lighthouse structure here and figuring out how it will go. So I cut my sphere in half and I sanded that off as well, and that's going to serve as the top part of my lighthouse. So I'm checking my phone to make sure that I'm keeping my inspiration picture in mind. I've got a little wood bead that I'm going to use on the top. I just added some hot glue and I'm tucking that on there. And then I'm going to try and fill in the hole with some more hot glue, just that it's filled in. I was just showing you my Ocean Chalk Paint by Waverly, and I'm going to give my base a good coat of the chalk paint, the ocean blue chalk paint, and I'm also going to be painting that little top dome piece as well with the same color. So now I'm going to be coming in with my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I am going to coat the 2 pieces that I had cut apart that are going to be the body of the lighthouse, if you will. and gonna just make sure that those are nice and covered. Obviously this is already white, but I just wanted it all to be painted. I'm showing you my little chippy brush that I'm going to use also with the Adirondack white. I'm going to do a dry brushing method on the base and also on the top. The top was still a little bit damp, so I did my best with that. I probably should have gone back in after it was dry and added some more white paint, but I didn't do that. So, and now I'm also, sorry, I'm kind of out of frame there, but I'm drawing a stripe around my larger base for my water tower, showing you my silver lining chalk paint, and I'm going to do a stripe around the upper part of the water tower. And also obviously I'm giving this other piece, this other wood round, a coat as well. So kind of told you about that out of order here, but so here I am doing the stripe and continuing to get everything painted based on the inspiration picture. Now I'm going to just use a generous amount of hot glue and glue the foam down to the wood round. And this actually held really well. So I know sometimes hot glue doesn't work real well with wood, but I guess because it was the foam, I don't know, it was working quite well. So I'm just making sure I'm getting this as centered as possible and just building up my little lighthouse here. And if you are returning, thank you so much for being here. You all know how much I appreciate you. If you are new, welcome to my channel. I hope that you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. And I am now grabbing a bunch of little beads. These are wooden beads. At first I was going to try and use the tumbling tower blocks, but they were a little bit too big for what I was looking to do. And so I opted to use these beads instead. The other thing I was thinking I probably could have used was dowels. I probably could have cut those down and used those, but I kind of liked the interest that this gave it. And of course there I realized that I'd missed painting one of the little wood beads because it was out of my line of sight. It was hiding behind the little lighthouse structure at the top there. So I made do with the ones that I had painted and it was all fine. So now I'm coming in with some white twine and I am just going to string all of these on here. This is going to be like my little rope barrier or rope railing, if you will. So I'm using just hot glue again, and I am adhering all of these to the little deck. Is that what you would call this on a lighthouse? I'm not sure. But just getting those all situated, and then I'm coming in and I'm tying off the little twine cord, and then I'll trim that down. So now it's time to add on the little dome to the lighthouse. So adding that in. And I just think this is so super sweet, you guys. What do you think so far? I am loving this. It makes my heart happy. So I'm taking some elephant chalk paint. You certainly could use black, but I decided elephant was going to be dark enough for what I was looking to achieve. And I'm just drawing a little doorway, just a little arched door. And obviously I've been doing all of this just by hand, but you can certainly tape things off if you feel the need to do that. But let me know what you think. I love this piece.
DIY number 14.
All right, I have these spindles that I got on Amazon. I'm using just one of them. It was a pack of 6, but I actually got 7 of them. I think it was just a mistake. And then I also have these wood trays, also from Amazon. I will have these in my Amazon store, which is linked in my description box. And I'm just measuring everything and making sure that I have an idea of what I'm doing here with these. But I'm going to start out with my antique wax, and I am going to give this a coat just to help it blend in with the wooden trays. And I believe the trays were 8-inch and 10-inch trays. So now I'm going to take a piece of parchment paper and kind of create a template, because I want to find a center on this octagon. And to do that, I'm going to kind of, you saw me kind of smooshing it in there to get the shape or the edges, and I'm cutting that out. Now I'm going to go ahead and fold this several times. You can see it's already folded through the middle once from the original piece of paper or parchment. I'm going to fold it several times going in different directions to try to help me find the center where all of those lines or folds connect. That's my center. Now I'm going to take just a regular nail and I'm going to knock it right through there. That's going to be my starting point. Now, I really hesitated to do this because I was afraid I was going to mess up these trays. These are really nice and heavy. They're about 3/4 of an inch thick on the bottom. So yeah, I started out with a smaller screw bit. And then I kind of worked my way up. I did work my way up a little too fast. You can see I have the box underneath there because I want to make sure I wasn't going to drill through my table. I also ended up having to change out the battery on my drill. I couldn't understand why it wasn't working real well. Yeah, the battery was dying, but at any rate, I was working my way up slowly with the bit sizes until I got to a point where I could fit my spindle in there. And now I've got just this regular wood, what would you call this, a wood square, and I sanded it down as you saw, and now I am going to just find center on this as well by going on the diagonal from corner to corner, and I am going to drill through this as well. I forgot to turn the camera back on after I changed the battery out on the drill. I gave that a coat of the antique wax as well, so I'm sorry that I didn't record that footage. And then I also glued it down with my Gorilla Glue. You saw me holding my Gorilla Glue there. I was just checking to see how long it takes for this to set up. Once it was sufficiently dry, I went ahead and started piecing it together, but I decided I wanted to have feet on it because I do have, you can see it sticking out through the bottom there, and you can see how it kind of splintered on the bottom. That was because I used too large of a drill bit too quickly, and I'm just trying to find it and make sure it's level here as well. So I went ahead and filled some of that in with the wood glue. It is on the bottom, so you're not going to see it. And then I also glued down all of those little wood beads that you saw me coating with the antique wax as well. So really simple way to make a tiered tray. This is honestly very solid. I am really proud of this little tray. It is so sweet. Just kind of glue all of the pieces together here. I waited for my little feet to be a little bit dry so that I wasn't going to knock them off, because they will knock off pretty easily if you don't do that. And then just pieced it back together again, made sure everything was level and all set. And that's really all there was to it. I'm going to line everything up, make sure my octagons are lined up, and that's it. Let me know what you think of this sweet tiered tray.
DIY number 15.
All right, I have from the Dollar Tree, well, the paint isn't, but the glass little globe, and then this school glue, and then I've got my Lost Lagoon paint. So I just squeezed off a bunch of the glue into the bowl, container, whatever you want to call this. I don't know if this is a vase. It reminds me of a fish bowl. And I'm just using a paintbrush to mix the paint into it. I wanted it to be relatively sheer. I honestly probably put in a little too much of the paint. I have too much of the glue also, but I'm going to show you what I do to get rid of the excess here. Once I have all of the sides of my fishbowl covered, I just kind of scooped out the excess and wiped it off on my parchment paper. And then now I am taking my jute cord. This is something I had picked up from Walmart, and I am finding a length that will work around the top of the bowl, but then also leaving tails, if you will. And my tails are probably about 12 to 14 inches long. So they're about, I would say, 3 times the height of the bowl, if that helps. And now I am just going to be cutting off additional lengths that are the same length when folded in half as the tails. Hopefully I'm making sense here. You'll see in a second why I'm doing that. But I believe I cut off an additional 6 strands there. And now I'm going to tie them by looping them through the larger loop. So I'm just going to let you see what I'm doing here. So I'm folding them in half and I'm looping them around. So folding it in half, getting it in there, tying it through the main loop. All right, so all these strands are hanging off, and I've got a total of 7 of them, I believe. So now I'm going to start taking these strands that are next to each other from separate knots, and I'm going to knot those together. Very, very simple. And I'm going to do that all the way around, taking the 2 that are next to each other from separate knots and knotting them together. And I'm just going to keep kind of pressing it down. I could probably have taped the top loop to the top of the vessel. That might have saved me a little bit of a headache, I suppose, and then it wouldn't have been moving around on me. So now that I'm watching this, that would have been a good idea. So feel free to tape down that top round if it will help you just kind of keep things in place. But you're going to work your way all the way down. Just keep doing exactly the same thing. So once you get all the way around the first row, you're going to drop down to the next row and tie the strands together again, the ones that are next to each other from opposite knots. And then once I got to the bottom, I went ahead and I pulled everything into the center. You can see just there, I've got that scrap piece there. I decided it was too short for what I wanted to do, so I cut off a longer piece, and I'm going to thread it through each of these little triangle diamonds. There you go, they're diamonds. Threading it through each of those at the bottom, and then I'm going to be pulling it tight and just getting everything gathered there. I don't know if this is the way that you're supposed to do this. It's the way that I chose to do it. If you know a better way to do this and to finish this off, feel free to leave me a comment and let me know what that is, and I might attempt it again and show everyone what the right way is. But for me, I opted to do it this way, and then I just trimmed off all of the extra. Now it will not sit flat because it's got that little thing, but I kind of like it kind of at an angle. But let me know what you think of this piece. I think it's so fun.
DIY number 16.
This is going to be super quick, super easy. This is a piece from the Dollar Tree. Clearly it is an anchor, and I am going to start out with a paint marker. I'm going to fill in with black all of these areas that have been, I'm going to say laser cut. It's not the ones that are completely cut out, but you can see there's kind of a design on the anchor itself. And so I'm filling all of those little areas in with my black paint marker. And once I have that done, I'll be coming in with some other paint. I'm just going to take my time, work my way through each of these little sections. This is something you honestly could do with your kids, with your grandkids. Let them use their imagination and color it however they would like. And these also light up. I think that's why it's got that kind of thick double wide thing going on. For whatever reason, however I did it, I managed to lose the little light that was in the back of this one, so this one won't light up for me. But I have another piece I'm going to be showing you in a little bit that does have the light in it and will light up, and I'll demo that for you in just a little while. But in the meantime, getting this all done and getting all of the pieces colored in. And now I have the silver, this is brushed metal silver. This is I believe this one is folk art. It is a plaid paint, just a regular acrylic paint that I'm doing in silver. And it's kind of like a gunmetal color. So Um, Keep in mind that when I do these projects, it really honestly is for inspiration, and you should use whatever colors make your heart happy. So I am doing this in silver, filling in all around. I'm doing everything except for the rope that comes around the anchor there. And so I'm just being real careful to try to keep away from the rope. And now for the rope, I'm coming in with brushed metal gold. This is also a plaid paint, and just coming in and making sure that the little rope is all painted and getting that done all in the gold. And to be honest, you guys, that is it for this one. I'm just going to finish up with the gold paint, and my piece will be done, and it'll be ready to decorate my tiered tray. Goes to show you don't have to always do something that is super involved to have cute pieces for your trays.
DIY number 17.
All right, this is from the Dollar Tree. Actually, all of those ribbons are from the Dollar Tree, and I picked out one that I wanted to use with this little planter from the Dollar Tree. I'm gonna go ahead and take off the jute cord that they have wrapped around the top. I'm using my heat gun because that was glued on there pretty solid, but once I warmed it up, I was fine. Just be careful because obviously it's metal, conducts heat, and you can burn yourself if you're not careful, but I warmed it up just enough to be able to get that off of there. I'm going to go ahead and take out my ribbon, and I'm going to adhere this to the top of the, I want to call it a bucket. It is a planter, technically, I guess, but just using some hot glue to secure that around in a couple of different places. And then I'm also going to be doing it around the bottom of the planter as well. So just a couple of little dots of glue here and there. Again, just be careful because the metal does conduct heat, so you want to be aware of that, and be careful not to burn yourself. Tucking under the ribbon end so it has a nice clean edge, and adding a little extra glue there and pressing that down. And then, like I said, I will go ahead and do the bottom of the planter as well. So once I have that all done, I'm going to take my paint marker, and I just wanted to give this little starfish a little bit extra emphasis, or definition. So I'm just tracing the bump outs. This is, I believe they call this debossed, so it's bumped up. And I am just going over the edges of the bumped up parts of the little stars to just help them stand out a little bit more. Because I think these planters are super cute. I just feel like they could be bumped up just a tad, given a little bit more definition. So that's what I did there. And then once I have that the way that I want it with the embellishments, I'm going to be grabbing a bunch of seashells. So here we go with that. Where are my shells? There. And I've got my starfish as well. So I've got my starfish, a bunch of shells that I had in my stash. These are also from the Dollar Tree. The starfish is not. The starfish I got in a pack a while ago from, I believe it was Home Goods. But I am stuffing down a shopping bag in the bottom because I want to kind of fill up my, I'm going to call it a bucket now. I'm going to fill up my bucket so that I don't have to use as many shells. So maybe the top quarter of the bucket I am adding in my shells, covering up that plastic garbage bag, not garbage bag, shopping bag, and just placing all of my shells around my starfish. So my starfish is now able to stand on its own. I'm going to kind of twist this around a little bit so that it's facing forward with the starfish on the front of my bucket. Now this is just a piece of foam core board. You can totally do this with wood. I decided I was just going to use a piece of foam core board. I don't know why, I just decided that's what I was going to do. So I'm cutting it down to just make sure all of my edges are even. This is cut down to 3 by 7. And once I had the rectangle cut down, I'm going to go ahead and angle off the edges. So I'm using the diagonals on my cutting mat and just lining up my ruler and cutting off that corner, and then I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. Just making sure that I've got it all lined up the way that it needs to be. I'm going to cut that off as well. So I'll have kind of a little arrow going on. So there's that. Now I'm taking my antique wax and I am going to make this look like wood. So again, if you don't have extra wood pieces, or you don't want to be cutting them into arrow shapes, or you don't have an arrow from the Dollar Tree and you want to be able to create something like this, no reason why you can't use a piece of foam core board, right? And I am going to make it look like wood. So using the antique wax, I'm kind of running my fingernails through it there, give it kind of a little bit of texture, not texture so much, but make it look like wood grain a little bit. Once that was dry, or mostly dry, I'm coming in with my Adirondack white chalk paint, and I'm just using a dry brush, trying to give it a little bit more character. And then I'm coming back over with my baby wipe that I used with the antique wax and just knocking that down a little bit. So I just kind of continued to blend that back and forth until I had it looking the way that I wanted it. And then once I was all happy with that, I went ahead and I grabbed out my white paint pen, and of course you saw me air writing. I'm very visual, so I kind of do the air writing first just to make sure I know where I can put all my letters, and then I went ahead and wrote that out. Now I went back in and I was making the letters thicker, but as I was doing this, I felt like the paint marker was picking up some of the antique wax, and the letters were not as white as I wanted them to be. They weren't as bright. Now, I think it's hard to tell on camera, at least in the little frame that I'm watching as I do my voiceover here. It looks pretty white to me on my laptop, but in person, it was just kind of muddy, and I guess you could call it a cream color, but it was like a dirty cream color, and I wasn't happy with it. And I thought, well, maybe if I go over it again, it'll brighten it up, and it just wasn't getting to where I wanted it to be. So once I had this all thickened out, I did go ahead and I grabbed out my white folk art acrylic paint, and I started trying to use this brush just to go over what I had already done. I didn't really want it to be wider than this, but ultimately I was like, you know what, this isn't working the way I'm trying to do it. I need to use the brush the way that it's created. So it was a little bit wider than I had intended, but it ultimately worked out really well, and I was happy with the brush strokes that I was getting here. And I was really pleased with it. So I'm just taking my time and going over all of my letters again. And again, you can't really tell as much here on the screen, but in person it made a big difference in the color. So I was happy, but just making sure that I don't close in my letters too much. So I want to make sure that we know that that's an A, and that I don't lose the center of my A, and then the same thing with the H. I just was trying to be real careful, but you can see with my brush strokes, I'm just going in the direction that works best for creating the letters. So not necessarily the way that you write them. Keep in mind we are drawing the letters, right? So once I had that done, I pulled out, this is a piece of dowel I had left over from another project, and I was sanding it down trying to make it sharp, and then remembered I had a pencil sharpener in my little drawer there. So I went ahead and sharpened that, and I stuck it in the bottom to make my little sign. I'm using some hot glue so that'll remain stuck in there, getting that all set, making sure it's secure. I did get some paint on the back of it, but I decided, you know what, it's just going to add to the charm. And then I'm sticking it down in my bucket with my seashells. And that's it.
DIY number 18.
Okay, this is a piece from the Dollar Tree. This is also from the Dollar Tree. It came in a pack of 5 or 6 different little sayings. Now you can see it says Hello Fall. Clearly it is not fall. We are not doing fall projects. We are doing summer projects. So I am just going to cut off the part that says fall. I am after the hello. So I scored it a bunch of times with my X-Acto knife, and then I was able to just kind of break away the pieces once I got it scored enough. So you might have to go over it several times. This is like a balsa wood. I think that's the right term for it. So it's relatively thin and it scores pretty easily. And so just breaking that off once I had that scored properly. And then I'm going to go ahead and take my sandpaper and make sure that everything that I cut is nice and smooth and sanded. Once I had that all set, I went ahead and also sanded my little wood block. You can see I took the hanger off of that, and I'm giving this one a coat of Summer Porch. That's my home decor. And then my hello is getting a coat of my Adirondack White. So just making sure everything has a really good coat on it. And then I will start piecing it together once everything is dry. This is my foam tape from the Dollar Tree. I'm cutting one piece into a bunch of different little pieces, and I'm going to stick this on the back of my hello sign. Now the reason I'm doing this, I wanted it to have even more of a three-dimensional kind of feel to it. So the foam tape, I mean, it's not super thick, but it's maybe 1/8 of an inch thick, I would guess. And so it's just going to have it raised up off of the surface of my little mini sign, just enough to give it a bit of a shadow, and I just thought it would be fun. So I'm going to go ahead and place that at the top of my little sign. And then I will take my pencil, air drawing again, figure out where I want my letters, and then I'm going to write with my pencil summer. So hello summer. Now you can tell I'm going super slow because this is sped up again almost 3 times normal speed. So just take your time and you can do this. Now this is a shade of pink that I had mixed on my own a while ago. This has been in my stash probably for at least a year, maybe longer. So I don't recall the exact colors that I used to mix it, but my guess is that I used red and white. That would be my guess. Not sure if I would have added anything else in there, but the great thing about paints is you can mix a bunch of colors together to get exactly the color that you want. So use your imagination and experiment. And I'm just going to continue to go over all of these letters with the pink paint until I have that all completed. And then once I have all of the pink letters on, you can see I kind of ended up closing in my little loop on my R there, and my M's got a little tight in places. So I just came back in once it was dry and used my yellow and cleaned that up a little bit. So just adding back in the little opening for my R loop there, cleaning up around the M's, and that was all there was to that. So then I grabbed a couple of little flowers out of my stash, and I was trying to decide which one I wanted. I ultimately decided on the blue, and then I thought it needed a little something more, so I grabbed some greenery that was way too big, so I just cut it down. So I got all those little leaves together, I trimmed it down, and then I took another look at it, and I still wasn't super happy with it like that, so I decided just to use a couple of the little pieces that I had trimmed off. So I've got the little flower there and just grabbing some of the pieces I trimmed, and that was what I liked. So I got 2 little leaves there, and I'm going to stick them in with the flower. So clearly I'm using the little hole there, and that's where I'm sticking the little bud tip of the flower down in. So I used my hot glue. I thought maybe that was going to be enough for all, but it was just enough for the leaves. So adding a little bit more and tucking my little flower bud piece, the little bottom of it, down inside the hole. And that's it.
DIY number 19.
All right, this one's going to be another really quick one. This is the one that has the light in it, so I will show you that at the end. But right now, I am just going to use my paint markers to get this started. Going to start out with the water down at the bottom with a really pretty aqua blue color. Get all of that filled in. Again, use whatever colors you want. If you decided you wanted to bring rocks down through there and make this rocks instead of waves, you could certainly do that. I opted, in my mind's eye, this looked like waves, so that was what I opted to do. But maybe it's up on a little island, you know, more than what I'm giving it, because now I am giving it a little bit of land to sit on here, and just working my way around the base. Also using this brown for the roof. And once I have that done, I'm going to actually come in with my red, because I don't know why. When you think of a lighthouse, do you think red? I always think red and white. I don't know why that is. I don't know if all lighthouses are red and white, but that's what I think of when I think of lighthouses. So using my red on the sides of the actual little house, and then I'll also use it on the chimney. And then I'm also going to use it at the top of the lighthouse tower. So around the base of the walk, is that what you would call that? What is it at the top of a lighthouse? Is it a catwalk? I don't know. But then I'm using a lemon yellow for the light itself. And now I've got my acrylic white paint out as well. And I am just going to fill in the rest of the lighthouse with that white paint. I did consider giving the stripes a little bit of red, and then ultimately I decided I was just going to make the tower itself white. And I think it looks really sweet with the red accents and the white tower. But you'll have to let me know what you think. And again, use your imagination. And this again would be a great little project to do with kids. So if you have young kids in your life who like to paint, this might be something that they could get into. And now I'm just adding a little bit of white on my waves. These were also lasered into the design itself, so they were still visible after I had applied my paint pen or paint marker. And that's really pretty much it. So you'll have to let me know what you think of this. And here we're going to light it up here for you too. And here we are with the final reveal.
DIY number 20.
All right, I have a couple of pieces of fabric from the Dollar Tree. These are clearly nautical, and I also have these tags from the Dollar Tree as well. I'm gonna go ahead and prep them. I was trying to decide, oh, I'm gonna take the little hanger off too to work with this, and then I'm gonna set it aside, and I will be using that again later. But I was trying to decide whether to work with the back side of these or the front side, and ultimately I did decide to use the front side because the fabric is just a little sheer. You can kind of see there. And I was worried that the brown would just kind of muddy it up. So using my matte Mod Podge, and I'm going to give this a really good coat of the Mod Podge, and then I will go ahead and place my fabric on it. Now, my sweet friends, crafting cousins, Kay and Trish from Crafting Cousins. I believe they have told me that they use fabric all the time with Mod Podge, and I don't think I've ever used fabric with Mod Podge. I usually use paper of some sort. So I was excited to do this, and you know what? It worked so nicely. It doesn't wrinkle. It's nice and smooth. I love it. But now I'm just using my X-Acto knife to kind of free up that hole because I will want to be able to hang these again. So setting that aside to dry, and I'm going to go ahead and get my second one ready. Again, just a good coat of the Mod Podge, placing the fabric down, just making sure it's nice and lined up, and then I'm going to free up that hole. I went ahead and trimmed off the excess fabric. I'm not going all the way to the edge because I'm going to be using my rotary cutter on that in a little while. It's just going to make it a nice, really clean cut right up against the edge of the tags. So but right now I'm going to just let them dry for a little bit. Now I have these cute little turtle cutouts. They are wood cutouts from the Dollar Tree. Pulling out a bunch of my paint markers. I want to try and figure out which colors to use, so I'm just kind of marking up my little parchment paper on the side there so I can figure out what is going to look nice with the tags, with the fabric that I've put on there. I want something that's going to complement. So I've got this really pale green color here. It's almost like a mint green. And I'm just going to give a base coat to all of my little turtles. I decided to go with 3 little turtles. So once I've got that on there, I came in with this darker green, and I'm going to try to kind of create the shell, kind of the appearance of the design on the tortoise shell or turtle shell. And then I came in with the blue and kind of filled that in. Now, when I did it this way, it kind of bled a little bit. And at first I was like, oh, I wish it hadn't bled so much. But I did it a different way for the second and third turtles, and you'll see that in a second. So you can see on the left, it kind of bled, right? So I went ahead and I filled in entirely with the green on the second and third turtle. Just kind of made an oval there to fill in the back of the turtle. And then I'm going to be coming in a moment and using the blue. And it gave much crisper lines. Ultimately, I think I might have liked it better with the bleeding, but you'll have to tell me what you think in just a second. So coming in now with my blue, this is like a marine blue color, and just outlining that, and then I will make my little shapes. And I wanted to make sure it was about the same shape as what I had done on the first turtle, so that's why I'm doing it the way that I am, as opposed to like making a star shape, like a complete star shape. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I kind of liked the bleeding better. I don't know. They're all cute anyway. But now I have a seahorse cutout. This is also from the Dollar Tree. It came in a pack of, I want to say it was like 8 of them because it's part of a garland that you can create. But I'm just going to use one of them, and I'm going to use the same colors that I just used on my turtle because I want them all to complement each other. So I came in with that mint color. Now I am coming through with the green, the darker green, I should say, and then I'll come in with the blue as well. And I was wishing that this one might bleed a little bit more. And as I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering if maybe if I had sprayed it with some water, if maybe it would have bled a little bit, because I just wished that the colors had melded together a little bit more than they're doing. I mean, it's still super cute, but I don't know. I felt like it was a little stripey, if you know what I mean. But I came in with that blue, and I don't know if I actually showed it later, but I did actually ultimately end up giving him a little eye. I used a black paint marker to create his eye. But before I did that, I'm adding a little bit more of the blue to the edges. So you can see there on his little belly and along his, do you call that a mane or a spine? I don't know. But here I've got my rotary cutter on my self-healing mat, and you can see it makes such a smooth cut, and you can run it right along the edge of that tag, right? And it just makes a really precise, clean cut. And I never could have achieved that with a pair of scissors. So it's fantastic. So I did that with the other one as well. Now I'm going to try and figure out how I want to piece them together. So I've got both of the tags lined up, and I'm going to put my little pieces on here to see how I want my turtles laid out. And now you can see the top right turtle is the one that had the bleeding, and the other two were kind of clean. I don't know. But so you can kind of see the difference there. I kind of like the one that bled. You know, something to keep in mind for the future. But ultimately I decided I liked the blue on top of the white as opposed to the other way around. I'm just placing everything the way I want it. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my hanger on there. I'm going to thread it through the seahorse first, and then I'll thread it back through the tags, and I will tie it off. That's just making sure that everything is all lined up, because I am going to glue these tags together, but I want to make sure that my holes are where they need to be for my hanger to hang properly. So I'm getting this done first, and then I will get everything glued down and you know, finalized, so to speak. So this is where I want it. Placing the little turtles again. They're so cute. Taking those two off, lifting this up so that I keep my place, so to speak, and I don't put glue where it's not needed. And I used a hefty amount of glue there, making sure that it's where it needs to be. And that's nice and secure. And then I'm just going to secure down my little turtles on the tags, and this is going to be all done. Let me know what you think of this one.
DIY number 21.
So $2.99 for this ombre wrapped canvas painting. We're gonna try it with a Dollar Tree picture frame, or excuse me, wrapped canvas. I've got my white apple barrel and my bright blue apple barrel paints, and I am going to start by just squeezing a whole bunch of paint out onto the canvas. So this is something I have not tried before, and I was kind of working through in my head how best to do this. So you can see me kind of thinking as I go here, but I'm starting out with this flat brush, and I'm just going to draw down on the blue. Now, when I started working in the white, it quickly started blending the colors, and I know that that's expected to some point, but I'm trying to figure out how to get that ombre effect, right? And so I'm trying a couple of different things. I'm like, okay, well, maybe I'll draw it all the way down. And so I've got my plate there, and I'm taking off the paint, and I'm just blending and blending and blending, and yeah, it just took some time to work with it. So again, I think I actually did do an ombre once, like a year ago, and I honestly don't even remember how I had done it that time, but this was definitely interesting. I enjoyed the process of this. I enjoyed figuring out what I needed to do to get the effect that I was looking for. And so I had, as you saw, just continued to add some more of the darker blue at the top, and I'm just working my way down. And eventually you're going to see me in a second, I'm going to grab a baby wipe, and I'm going to start cleaning my brush after every swipe. I don't know if that's the right technique. Like I've said in the past, if you've watched my videos, I am not a trained artist. I have never taken a painting class. I am not a painter by, any stretch of the imagination as far as being like taught or skilled. I enjoy it though. I'm having so much fun figuring out paint. And so it's been really fun for me. Here I'm getting my baby wipe. So because you know what, I am determined, if nothing else, to get things to work out. So this is a good example of when to just be patient with yourself, give yourself a chance. And if it's not looking like what you hope right in the beginning, keep working on it and you can get it there. Or sometimes it might even end up being better than what you had expected and hoped. So you can see me going back to my plate every once in a while. I had taken quite a bit of paint off of the canvas when I was doing this because, just with the fact of trying to not drag the deep blue too far down the canvas. I was unloading a lot of paint onto the plate, but that gave me the opportunity to just go back and pick up more when I needed it. So now if you had noticed on the inspiration picture, the image was kind of dragged out to around all four sides. So that's what I'm doing now, and just giving it that kind of wispy sense around all of the sides. And you should see me right now because I'm like trying to talk with my hands to like demonstrate yeah, it's late. But I actually really do like the way that this turned out, and so I hope that you're enjoying it as well, and I hope that this will inspire you to try some ombre. So here is my ombre. It's still a little bit damp, but I think it's really sweet. And I didn't have to pay $299 for it. And some of my sweet subscribers have told me that I must sign my paintings. So I'm just pulling out my Arteza acrylic paint marker, and I just signed my artwork, and that's it. It is all done. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 22.
All right, I have these two frames, one of which I had used before for a project last year, and the other one is just for my stash, and it was the same exact kind of frame, and I need two of the same for this particular project. And I know I want to take all of those little doodads out of the frames, but ultimately I was like, you know what, I will do that after I do my first step with the glass, because I really need to do that first. But it had all of this extra stuff in there because these frames are kind of deep. But anyway, I got the glass out, and now I'm going to be using silicone caulking, my isopropyl alcohol, and I have some sand. I also have this, oh my goodness, mica powder by Arteza, and I picked out a really pretty blue color. I'm cleaning up my glass first with the alcohol. And now I have a piece of foam core board that I thought was a great idea to use for this. Turns out it really was too thick. There are instructions for this on a blog that I found, and I will make sure I link the blog in my description box. But I should have followed the instructions. It specifically said 2 millimeters. Foam core board is definitely thicker than 2 millimeters, probably at least twice as thick. So I did ultimately run into some issues with the final product, but I'm going to share all of my mistakes with you so that if you attempt this, you will have greater success. So I've added the caulking to 3 sides. I've got my foam core board there. I've sandwiched my glass together. And just be careful if you do this, you guys, you don't want to cut yourself on the glass. I was being very careful and did not cut myself. So you just want to be very careful because the glass sometimes can be very sharp. I'm putting down a piece of board on top of it and then weighting it down with some of my craft supplies. I'm going to let that dry. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and prep my frame. So I took all of the little doodads out, and then the second frame I went ahead and gave it a dry brush of my white Adirondack chalk paint so that it would match the other one that I had already worked with. So the next day, actually I guess it was that evening, I pulled out my card foam core board, and this is all ready to go. I'm trying to get it standing up there. I started out with my black sand, and I'm looking at it, and it was really, really coarse. Like, I was worried that it was not going to work. And then I was like, oh no, I wonder if my white sand is the same way. It was not. It was more like sand. So I opted not to use the black. I've got the white. I'm putting it on a piece of parchment paper, tucking my parchment paper between the glass panes, and pouring it into my piece here. Adding some more of the white sand, and now to this one I'm adding the mica powder. I did end up adding a little bit more mica powder by itself, so you can kind of see there was like smudges of it on the glass. And now I'm adding in salt water. Oh, sorry, you can probably hear Sammy's chain rattling in the back, his collar. Salt water, and then my isopropyl alcohol, 70% alcohol. Hopefully I'm saying that word right, isopropyl. But it calls for a 50-50 mix of the salt water and the alcohol. It did not tell me how much salt to put in the water, so I just kind of played it by ear. And my understanding is that this prevents algae from growing inside of your piece with the water being in there. So between the alcohol and the salt, I guess it keeps it the way that it needs to be. So I dried that all off with my paper towel, and I'm coming back in with my silicone to seal this last side. Now this is where I started realizing, you know what? I should have followed the instructions. It should have been the 2 millimeters and not whatever this ended up being, because I was afraid my silicone caulk was just going to fall down inside. So I'm kind of going back and forth like I'm icing a cake to make sure that it's got support on either side, and then I'm just going to have to take off the excess caulking later. So it worked ultimately, but then I also was realizing that my water settled more with the sand before, like after I sealed it up. I should have given it more time to settle because I ended up with a lot more air in there than I needed. And that ends up being a challenge as well. I used my sharp blade to cut off all of the excess silicone very carefully. Now I'm just checking to make sure it's all gonna fit in the frames before I start piecing it together. Now, if you recall, I had pulled out a bunch of extra stuff from the frames because it was a deep set frame, almost like a mini shadow box, kind of. So I'm adding back in some foam core board to kind of help make sure that the glass is secure in there. I probably only should have added it to one side of the piece because ultimately my frames didn't go all the way back together. So I ended up using some cord that I'll show you in a minute, but in the end it all worked out fine. So I pieced in all of my little foam core board pieces that I had cut, and I got those hot glued in, and then I went ahead and I started piecing together my project here. So once I made sure that it was all going to fit, I went ahead and used hot glue around the entire edge. I did this on both of the frames one at a time. So I did the bottom one, and you're going to see me put the glass in, and then I added hot glue all the way around the edge of the other frame and just set it down on top. And I can't remember if I show you all of that, so that's why I'm kind of telling you what I did. Yeah, apparently I showed you all of it. So just running a bead of hot glue all the way around and making sure that it's going to be nice and sealed up against the glass. So flip that over, get it on there, and just pressing it together. And then I went ahead, so you can see that gap. So I took some of this, I think it's actually macrame cord, and I just ran a bead of glue along the edges of the frame, and I'm just holding it together in place until the glue dries sufficiently, or cools, excuse me, sufficiently around the cord. And I just wrap that around the entire piece, and I'm just pressing it down in so that I make sure that the cord isn't going to hinder its ability to stand up by itself. Tucking in the end and making sure that that is nice and secured, gluing that little end down, and that is pretty much it, you guys. But you can see I've got too much air in the piece, so and the frames are the glass frames are too far apart, so the sand falls too quickly. But let me know what you think.
DIY number 23.
All right, I have a canvas from the Dollar Tree as well as a disposable tray, also from the Dollar Tree. It came in a pack of 2. I have a bunch of acrylic paints that I pulled out of my stash, and I'll be showing you those colors in a little bit. And then I have some just regular paper cups out of my pantry, as well as my paint pour medium that I picked up from Walmart. So I am going to, first of all, go ahead and set up my canvas on top of 4 of these cups. This is going to allow for all of the paint to drip off as we do our paint pouring, and it won't actually have the project sitting in the excess paint. So got that set. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my colors out. I have Natural Buff, Skin Tone. This one is Surfboard, Ceramic Coat. This is another Ceramic Coat, Lost Lagoon. And then True Blue by Folk Art. These are all plaid products. This one is from Walmart. That might actually be a plaid product as well, but I'm not 100% sure, so don't quote me on that. But I'm going to go ahead and get everything mixed. The pour paint medium requires, well, the instructions say to do a 50-50 mix with your paint color. My particular acrylic paints are rather thick, so I did not do a 50-50 mix. I just put in enough to get it to the point where I thought it was a good consistency. This second paint color that I just used, it was a little on the thick side, so I did go ahead and add in some more medium, and I just kept going until I had it to the consistency that I was looking for. I did, in hindsight, wish that I had added a little bit of water to these paints as well, and after I worked with these here, I did ultimately do that for the next round. But as you can see, I'm just pouring them out over my canvas where I want them, and you can see they're not moving real fast, and I've got this sped up almost 3 times normal speed. So I definitely needed them to be a little bit more liquidy than they came out, but it all worked out in the end. Now, I do recommend wearing gloves for this. I didn't have any gloves, so I'm not wearing gloves, but it definitely gets messy. So definitely recommend wearing gloves if you're going to do paint pouring. Now you can see this is really, really pretty thick. So I'm giving it a bit of a hand with my finger, making sure that everything is coming down over the edges of the canvas so that it's all kind of cohesive, so to speak. And I'm going to be pouring on a little bit extra paint along those edges in a moment as well. But this was such a fun project. I have not done a whole lot of paint pouring before. I think I tried it once with a vase, actually a couple of vases, and that project didn't turn out the way I had envisioned. And I've always wanted to come back and do actual paint pouring on canvas. I'm trying to remember if I had done that before, and if I did, forgive me, because I'm just not remembering that project. It must have made a great impression on me. So I'm going to go with no, that this is my first attempt. But yeah, I don't recall. So at any, oh, you know what? I did it with a kit. I did it with a Five Below kit. That's what it was. And it was, yeah, this one is much more successful. Let's just put it that way. All right. So here I'm coming in with my blues. You can see I did add water to these. They are much more the consistency that I was looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and run these around. Now you'll notice my beige colors are not moving at all now, and that is because I did let it sit for about half hour, 45 minutes to let it dry a little bit before I added in my blues. I'm going to come back and add a little bit more of this lighter color, and I'm just going to keep moving it around, and I'm just going to keep doing that until I get it to a place that I'm happy with it. So more of the blues. And I love watching this and the way that the paint moves. It's so cool and satisfying to me. I don't know what it is, but I'm just making sure that I'm getting all of the corners covered. I want to make sure that the entire canvas is covered. Now I did try to come in with my heat gun to see if I could get the paint to move that way a little bit. it was great for popping air bubbles, but it really didn't move the paint. So then I grabbed a straw and I am blowing through the straw onto the paint. Now, if you choose to do this, just be aware that you can get lightheaded pretty quickly if you're not careful. So just be conscious of that and take your time with it, and make sure that you are breathing the way that you need to breathe, not to have any kind of an issue. But I'm just going to continue to come through here. And at one point I did actually somehow manage to blow hard enough that my blue, dark blue, ended up on my sand. So I'm just going to come in and scoop that out with my little tool, and it actually picked up. I noticed once if I just tapped on top of it, it actually pulled up the paint completely fine. So it was really easy to get that cleaned up. Coming back in with some more of that medium colored blue. I think that one was the Lost Lagoon. What a fun color name. And adding in a little bit more of the true blue. And you can use whatever colors you want. I was going for a beach kind of scene here, so that's why I'm using the blues and the sand colors, obviously, because this is a nautical video. So I was going for waves and beach. You'll have to let me know ultimately if you think I achieved that. Keeping in mind that this was my very first attempt to do something like this, other than that Five Below kit, which was probably not a huge success to begin with. But at any rate, now I'm coming in with some white. I did not show that to you before because this was, I forgot to bring it out, quite honestly. I'd been trying to figure out what I was going to do with that. But I had mixed it up the same as the others with the paint pour medium, a little bit of water. In hindsight, I wish I had added more water because I wish that the white had been more transparent, or perhaps I should have added less paint to the pouring medium. I'm wondering if maybe that would have helped my white to be a little bit more transparent, because I wanted to create the idea of foam. But you know what? Again, I'm going to give myself a little bit of grace, and I am going to just acknowledge that this is the first time that I'm attempting this. So we can't all be expert paint pourers the first time we try something, right? But at any rate, I'm going to continue to bring in a little bit more white, get this moving a little bit more, and then once I have it where I want it, I'm going to come in with a brush and just kind of dipple the sand area. Now, you don't have to do that. I just decided I thought it would be fun to have a little bit of texture on my sand part, but otherwise this is done. Let me know what you think.
DIY number 24.
All right, this is like a bonus project, okay? So I had all of this leftover paint from that paint pouring project. Not so much of the sand tones, but I had a lot of the blues and the white, and I didn't want to waste the paint. So I thought, you know what? I'm gonna grab another canvas out of my stash. This is also from the Dollar Tree. This is a smaller canvas. I'm trying to remember what the size of these are. I think it's larger than a 5x, maybe a 6x8, and I think the other one was an 8x10. That's my guess, but don't hold me to that because my memory is shot. But at any rate, I'm going to use more of a traditional paint pour method here, and this is the first time I'm trying this, but I've got my white pour paint there, and I'm going to pour in the other colors into my white paint cup. So I'm going to start with the lightest of my blues. I'm going to just pour all that in. Once that's all in, I'm going to pour in my medium color blue, and then I'm going to go ahead and pour in my true blue. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab those cups from the sand colored paints that I wasn't going to be using. I'm going to use those to support my canvas. Now, I did not have an extra tray. I do have a piece of cards poster board underneath my work surface here, so I decided I'd already made a mess of it. I was just going to use that as my catch-all, but normally I would put a tray of some sort underneath this. But I'm going to just pour out my paint and I'm gonna drag it through. You're gonna see as I kind of go back and forth here, the colors coming through. I think this is the coolest thing in the world. And I was just going back and forth at first. And then I started bringing it out to the sides a little bit more here and there. And yeah, so that was pretty much the extent of that. And once I had all of the paint out of my cup, and I guess I thought maybe it would be satisfying for you to watch all of this. But once I have it all out of my cup, I'm going to go ahead and start swooping it around. Swooping? I don't know if that's the right word. But at any rate, I'm just going to angle the palette. And this one I am doing in real time. So you can see this is actually how the paint moves. And I just think it is the coolest thing to watch. I don't know about you. Leave me a comment. Let me know. Do you like watching the paint kind of moving all over the surface here? I just think it is so fun and so cool. But I'm making sure that I'm getting it to each of my corners. I want to make sure that I get everything covered before I start having a lot of paint fly off the side of the canvas, and I don't then have enough to cover everything. So I'm just being mindful of that. And also keeping an eye on the picture, so to speak, the design that's kind of unfolding before my eyes. So I'm holding it from underneath, trying to keep myself as clean as possible because, again, I'm not wearing gloves. Do recommend the gloves. But look at how cool this is. And I'm just going to keep manipulating it a little bit until I get the design to where I think I want it. And then I'll be able to set it aside and let it dry. And yeah, guys, I think I might actually like this one better than the original one that I mixed the paints up for. But you'll have to leave me a comment and let me know which one you like better, because this one is done.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today. If you enjoyed the project, please give me a big thumbs up. Remember to leave me a comment. It really does help me to get noticed by YouTube, and it helps my channel to grow. I sincerely appreciate all the support. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next time, be well, be kind, and make it a great day. Take good care. Bye.